of Kaaba? Black. By what it is dressed? By black. Black stone. What is the name of it? Black stone. Why? Because it is black. Light will come from your mouth. Black. Yeah? Allah Almighty is choosing in His divinely entire kingdom His light to be black. And all sons, not the son, all sons, and the mother of the son, which always in sujood in the divine presence of Allah Almighty, and all the divinely godly ocean of lights, where Rasulullah representing it, all they have the color of black. And the light which Allah Almighty choosing for Himself is black. And for this, the sun is giving light to all the entire space, where it is not empty and not full, but full with all kinds of swimming orbits and planets and galaxies, and all they are lightened, all of them, and the color of their light by Allah Almighty dressing them to be black. When the black touch anything related to the kingdom which is down of the throne, it will take color of what you see, the color of the sun, daytime. When Allah Almighty making everything to be swimming in His light, it will be black. Even the sun up is black. Not like this light which you are seeing here. Even all moon is black. All divinely godly lights of Allah Almighty choosing for Himself the color to be black, and the light is black. And for this Allah Almighty, when He blow from His soul into Sayyidina Adam entering, making the soul and inside and the heart, their light is black. And for this, when you open your mouth, must be light coming, but it will be black, the color of black. And Kaaba, Allah Almighty dressing it by black. Bayt al-Ma'mur is black. The throne of Allah Almighty is black. All of them dressed by the light of black. And the black of Allah Almighty, this light, is much more shining and much more attractive than all any other colors which you see. And for this you will see always the Kaaba lightened by black. And it's black, must not be lightened, but you will see it lightened because it is the light of Allah Almighty. Allah Almighty choosing this light. And for this all the way from sun to earth, it is all lightened, but the light given up to be black, down given to be yellowish. Because children of Adam alayhi salam, Allah made their egos and their mentality to love gold. And for this dressing them by the light of gold. While to Allah Almighty, the light up is black. And when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in the night, Mi'raj night, and is ascending in all these horrible heavens to reach to the throne, all the oceans of light was black, totally black. So horrible. All the reality secrets is swimming in oceans of lights, of black lights, in the divinely godly words of Allah Almighty. And Allah Almighty saying for this light of Allah Almighty, Nurun ala nur, even black, but it is light over light. Allah choosing for Him as a light for Jalali, what we call Jalali, not majesty, but Jalali mean Allah Almighty is choosing for himself the almightiness, power, magnificent, Jalali,
attraction.
Jalali mean that something which makes the one to be always to be under panic and frightened from what is giving this light. Choosing this light, Allah Almighty, to frighten anyone to approach to His divine presence. And for this He will burn any jinn or shaitan who will fly to get anything from heavens. And Allah Almighty making His divinely lights of the throne which is shining, and the lights of holy face of Allah Almighty shining, it is all by the color of black, of majesty of Allah Almighty. While the carpet of Allah Almighty is red. The carpet of the kingdom of Allah Almighty is red. And for this Allah Almighty choosing, creating a river crossing inside the throne by the color of red, referring to the carpet of Allah Almighty, and every drop of this river, Malaika praising, glorifying, and sparkling. How there is tonic water always sparkling, like this sparkling, the Malaika praising, glorifying, full with life, all jumping. How the Solomon fish jump, like this jumping in this river, praising, glorifying Allah Almighty, and Allah Almighty making this river is the blood of mankind to bless to them from the majesty of Allah Almighty. And for this the blood is red. And sacred also. And for this Allah Almighty say, don't anyone to eat or drink blood, because it is a sacred, from the sacred river in the throne of Allah Almighty. The sacred river of life, where Allah Almighty blessing from His life into this river, and making the Malaika to be jumping, praising, glorifying, full with life, to be always descended. Allah descend them and let them in every newborn one, in the body, in every one of His creation. And for this Allah showed the color of red, for His majesty Allah Almighty, making that the red color, the blood to be look like the carpet of Allah Almighty, which Allah Almighty telling Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the night journey, step by shoes on my carpet, my beloved Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam means that Allah Almighty telling him, dress by your ego and your humanity, because no more you have ego or humanity when you are crossing all these horrible heavenly stations, all these oceans of light which are black from the light of Allah Almighty. Maulana say the light of Allah Almighty is black. And like this, when he crossed, no, he was totally melted, finished, burned in the ocean of light. No more any trace of Rasulullah was appearing anymore. Then Allah Almighty surviving the reality of Rasulullah by a divinely godly reality from Himself, and blessing him by a godly self from Allah Almighty. No more ego, but godly self from Allah Almighty, and blessing him by a godly body, divinely godly body from the lights of Allah Almighty, and by this was ascending and approaching to Allah Almighty until he was saying, I saw Allah Almighty by the eyes of Allah Almighty. Not by my eyes, but by the eyes of Allah Almighty. Because now his body, his light, godly body which he was dressed, it was all dressed by all the attributes from Allah Almighty, which belong to Allah Almighty, Allah dressing on this godly, divinely light body which was dressed to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And like this, Rasulullah was saying, I saw Allah Almighty by the eyes of Allah Almighty. And so this Allah Almighty, He said to beloved Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, neither heavens or earths, I choose them, or Kaaba, or Bayt al-Ma'mur, or Throne, or Quds al-Sharif. I didn't choose any one of them to be house for me. I am settling myself. The house of me is the heart of children of Adam alayhi salam. I am choosing the heart of children of Adam alayhi salam to be my house. And I am settling my throne in his heart. And for this Allah Almighty obliging the blood to enter into the heart, to read these chambers, which every chamber contains special jewels and light, and protected the first chamber by jewels and light by Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu and all Imam of 40 ways, like Sayyidina Abdul Qadir al-Gailani, Sayyidina Ahmad al-Rifa'i, Sayyidina Bishr al-Hafi, Shayban al-Ra'i, Hassan al-Basri, Muhyiddin ibn al-Arabi, Ahmad al-Rifa'i, all Ahmad al-Badawi, all these big awliya, protecting the light of Allah Almighty and jewels which is dressed in the first chamber. And the blood is in need to be survived again to take from this light. So that the malaika again will be well charged, as the mobile telephone, when it is empty, you must charge it. And like this, the blood must be charged again to be full battery to go for a second circulation in the body. Then it needs to go to the second chamber where Allah Almighty dressing it by lights and by jewels and secrets and realities of Iman, Ihsan, of life from Allah Almighty, which is taken care and protected by Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and all Grand Sheikhs and Mawlana Shaykh. Then he is obliged to go to the third chamber down, where Allah Almighty dressing everyone there by the throne and the light of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, from which everyone is appearing in the divine kingdom of Allah Almighty, and there it is only protected by the hand of Rasulullah. No one else to interfere. No prophets, no awliya, no one to interfere except Rasulullah. And the blood is in need to be dressed by life from Rasulullah to continue the circulation of life in the body. Then it needs to go to the fourth maqam, which is the absolute hidden maqam, where is the house of Allah Almighty and the throne of Allah Almighty, which Allah Almighty saying, neither the earths or heavens, I choose to be my house, only the heart of children of Adam alayhi salam. There, in this fourth chamber, the house of Allah Almighty, where Allah Almighty settling his throne and settling his greatest name on this throne, and settling his lights, and settling all his malaika whom they praising, glorifying Allah Almighty all the time. And Allah Almighty saying, there is the secret between me and my servant. No one there can dare to say that he is a servant, or he is Allah, or this is Allah or his servant. And the blood is in need to go to that maqam to be well dressed by light from Allah Almighty, and to be supported to all these three chambers before coming to the fourth chamber. Allah will support them and will send them quickly. Allah will push him. Allah Almighty making special malaika to pump him, not the earth is pumping, nothing else. Pumping the malaika, the blood, and walking with the blood to cover all the circulation of all the body until it reached to every cell, to every atom, to every part of the body to give life, then quickly going back to the heart to take another action of to be dressed by light from Allah Almighty and to be pumped by Allah Almighty by malaika into the body again. This is the answer. You know the answer. وَمِنَ اللَّهِ التَّوْفِيقُ. High knowledge, not everyone can understand. It needs only to be taken by the heart to understand, not by the mind. This cannot enter into mind. Mind is limited. Heart is the house of Allah Almighty. So wide and accept and may Allah forgive us and mercy us. Now everyone is free. You can drink, you can eat. I will drink also.